Coming up, with the reporting heating up around one Dejounte Murray potentially moving on from the Atlanta Hawks, we dive in on if Brooklyn should be a suitor, what the price point would be, and what it would mean for the short and long-term future of the Brooklyn Nets. We dive in coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there is Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And where we get started, Doug, is exactly where every team that's basically losing every game they play in finds themselves right now, thinking about being buyers at the trade deadline.
It's we're heating up on trade season, and we knew the Nets were going to be in these discussions, whether, sort of coming or going. It's a little hard to tell where they are. They've been rumored to, wanting to be big game hunting when it comes to stars. There's also the idea that they could sell off some of the veterans here at the trade deadline. There are a lot of question marks around the Nets, and one of the guys, and I think they'll be brought up in most discussions whenever someone like from another team of any talent and age on the younger side shakes loose, but they are being
assets for so many different reasons. The Nets are in those discussion points. Yeah.
And they need to upgrade their talent, right? No matter what. So I think you'll hear them in and around all these discussions. And then, Dejounte Murray is rumored to be possibly on the move from Atlanta, and multiple sources have been, or multiple, just different personalities and informed people have been mentioning Dejounte Murray or mentioning the Nets when it comes to Dejounte Murray. Jake Fisher from Yahoo mentioned it, saying that there was no real traction, but that it just made a lot of sense. And then Brian Windhorst, who's as dialed in as it gets, mentioned to keep an eye on the Nets in a recent podcast interview as well. So I don't know if we're saying things are heating up on the Dejounte Murray front, but clearly if he is put on the market, you have to assume the Nets are going to at least be part of the discussions. And we could talk about what that would mean if they were to try to land him.
Yeah, I think just from a high level standpoint, Murray, right age range, if we're talking about the, Mikal Bridges, Cameron Johnson core of this team, and that may frustrate Nets fans to a certain degree about that being what they want to do going forward. But if you think about it, he fits the timeline. The contract is nothing where you'd be too concerned about it in the short or long term, whether or not it fit in and it helped the Nets win more basketball games. And they thought there's something to be said here for the future with this core, or looking at his contract and knowing that going all the way, even though it's a player option in 2027, $31.5 million, the numbers are not bad. So you can plug him in here, and you can also look at him from a fit standpoint and say, hey, we have a little bit more of a opportunity to set ourselves up from a ball handling standpoint. Think about him more in a San Antonio Spurs kind of stat line than we think about him in Atlanta. And it'd be an opportunity potentially, as we'll discuss, to maybe move off of some pieces that the Nets currently have that aren't going to hold value beyond this year as well.
Yeah, and like from the Hawks' perspective, when it comes to Murray, they've clearly seen, they tried the Murray plus Trey thing. It's just not really working. It seems like they want Trey is the person they're going to keep at this point. I think that makes sense. He's just better. And so, moving on from Murray, it makes sense from their standpoint, but it's not even necessarily like a knock on Dejounte Murray that they would be moving on from him. It's more like an admission that we tried this, dual guard thing. We thought you were going to give a little more juice in the defensive end, maybe more off ball stuff. And like the pairing of those two guys hasn't really flourished at all. Like the Dejounte plus Trey is a negative 3.6 net rating. Trey without Dejounte is a plus 2.3. Dejounte without Trey is a minus 1.3. So it's basically Murray plus Trey bad, Trey no Murray good, Murray no Trey bad. But some of that could be an extension of just like the rest of the roster not really having enough juice either. So where do you stand with this when it comes to Dejounte Murray? Like when you hear this, and with the caveat, it's all about what you give up, right? Like this always, we always have to start a situation like that. It's like, I would take, Jokic right now. Oh, never mind. I give up anything. That's a bad example. I would take some middling NBA player if he meant giving up nothing, right? So there's always And then, then as you rise up along the star level, you have to think about how much you want to throw out there. But when it comes to Murray, maybe just like all things being equal, does it make sense for you to think about adding him to this team?
Yeah, on a surface level of the player that he is, the skill set, and what the Nets need, yes. Like I think it makes a lot of sense. Now, again, if you look at him in Atlanta, it's a little bit of a different style of player, obviously playing alongside a Trey. But if you plugged him in to Brooklyn and you think back to when his assist numbers are up over 6 and 7, going back to his San Antonio days, you need a facilitator. You need a guy on ball. Like we've kind of seen what Dennis Smith Jr. has meant to Brooklyn when he's got expanded minutes here and how it's helped create a little bit of more balance inside of those units. Now, the problem probably at a high level is going to be, before we even talk cost and everything else, is what does it mean from a needle moving standpoint? Because this then gets into the category of, yes, he's a good player. He's better than what you currently have, but does he dramatically change the outlook? If this is the step one of a multi-step process, whether this year or going forward, then I can start to wrap my head around it. But I just don't know if it makes sense for the Brooklyn Nets to start looking at their assets and saying, we're going to make this decision in this moment because the make the playoffs in 2023, 2024 is going violently off the rails, and we want to save that. And I'm having a hard time deciphering whether or not that would be the reason the Nets make this move versus a high level. We believe this is going to push us in the direction of being a real playoff team and being an exciting team to watch over the coming seasons. So that's why I know it's a little bit muddled, but it's hard for me to kind of pick a hard direction here because it would feel like, yeah, he's a player. And maybe I'll say this, maybe he ends up falling kind of into the Mikal Bridges, Cameron Johnson category. Really good player, still needs superstars ahead of him if you want to accomplish something at the NBA playoff level.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And actually, I think that might be the thing that the Nets are thinking about the most, is like thinking about, is it good enough to have a bunch of guys along the same timeline, or is it good enough to sort of just, get really uncomfortable here and just wait all the way for like the real true superstar? I have a couple thoughts on that. We'll get into those here in a second. First, going to tell you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. Over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You always find exactly what you're looking for with eBay Guaranteed Fit. Your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items apply. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
All right, so as we continue, the budding rumors heading towards the deadline, which we know are always going to happen, and whether or not the Brooklyn Nets could be a team in play here. By the way, I do want to ask you about that question on where these guys, a guy like Murray, fits in with the Bridges and the Johnson of the world. But just as a note, kind of the reason why the Nets are bubbling into this is because a lot of the original reporting is about conversations between the Lakers and the Hawks and saying Murray's on the table here, but they don't have the assets, right? This comes back to how Brooklyn just has all of these picks and maybe some valuable players. So it's always going to, as you said at the top, be a conversation that they can be in on almost anybody if they want to. Do you think that Murray is just one of those dudes that doesn't necessarily move the needle for Brooklyn?
Yeah, look, he's like a very good NBA player, right? Like, and the contract, I think you have to say the contract is an advantageous one with the cap going up and you sort of like with where things just stand right now with the 18 this year, 25, 27, 29, and then that player option, which I don't know, that's like probably close about whether he opts into that. The contract is right around the same timeline as Cameron Johnson. It's a year more than Mikal Bridges. They're all generally ish the same age, right? Like there's a lot of overlap in terms of like why you'd want to have a guy like him with that group if you were just trying to like do some floor raising team building, right? Yep. Like championship level stuff, definitely not. Winning, losing every game like they're losing right now, yeah, that would no longer be the case. Pair him maybe next to Cam Thomas, maybe have some of the same Trae Young and Dejounte defensive issues that Atlanta's had. So I don't know if that totally solves that, but in terms of like having a well above average ball handler offensive initiator, a guy that with that Spurs team, I actually think that Spurs team overachieved a little bit. It was like Derek White, it was Jakob Poeltl. Like they didn't have an amazing record, but they didn't have tons of talent either. And so I think, but going back to your original point of, would we just be putting another above average, top 60 dude, top 50 guy or something like that on a team? Almost for sure. And I just don't know. This is such a close call for me. And the thing that really starts to make you feel different about this is losing.
Yep.
I'm dead serious, right? It's like, I know everyone out there is probably thinking the same thing. It's like losing, even on a fan level, really starts to make you look different about these things. When you're winning and you're kind of overachieving and it's like, now we'll wait, bide our time, good team. You lose a gajillion games in a row, and all of a sudden you're like, I don't know. Do we need the Phoenix picks? Wouldn't mind seeing a W. And I'm not saying they should do that, but this is, it really does start to change your thought process a little bit around it. And Murray, I think from that perspective, makes sense. And I don't know if I'm just a little too prisoner of the moment with that.
No, and I wonder if that's how Sean Marks and the Nets organization looks at it, right? Like, yes,
I hope not.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, down the road, we certainly think that those picks will mean something from Phoenix and or the Dallas ones eventually, but we also thought we would be playing competitive 500-ish basketball. So, if you're selling the product, that was one of the cornerstones of what they were doing in the short term, right? We're going to be competitive. We're going to make the playoffs. All right, we're not going to win playoff series, but at least we'll be able to hang our hat on that year over year for the next 2 or 3 seasons until that big moment comes. Now you're looking at it and going, oh, we're bad. Like we're a bad basketball team. Okay, you can fire Jacques Vaughn. That's been obviously the running theme. Okay, you can say that Cameron Johnson is not the player you thought he was going to be. Great. It's still what you have right now. And the thing that maybe indicates that the Nets do think that, which I think would be a mistake, that, oh no, we still are this team, that's why we're going to go make this move, has to do with the fact that a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith, as reported by Andy Katz from The Athletic, updating what the narrative was in the offseason coming to the start of the season, they still want the equivalent of 2 first-round picks for him. When you set that type of price point as your team is trending in the wrong direction simultaneously, it sends a message to me of a team that still wants to accomplish the narrative goals that they set for themselves at the start of the year, making the playoffs and being competitive. And why is that concerning? The team in the Atlanta Hawks that are talking about trading one of their talented players are far better than you right now, right? Like, so there's an issue here when you just look at the standings and go, we are not one of the good teams. We're not one of the teams that's a player away from being a good team. And so you may just end up kind of selling low on a lot of your draft capital to make a margin move that doesn't really do much for you in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, and this is why this is going to be fascinating too, because right, like when you compare them specifically to the Hawks, like they are like right in, they're kind of in lockstep in the standings right now, right? And I don't know if like the Hawks are necessarily headed in the right direction, but we know that the Nets are headed in the wrong direction, right?
Right.
And if you had to make a bet on one of these two teams, you just have to pick Atlanta. And so it just ends up in, it's just like this really just weird spot. And if it sounds like I'm waffling a little bit, it's because I kind of am. Like, this isn't a clear-cut decision for me. And I think if you're out there saying it's so clear-cut to you one way or the other, I actually just don't know how that can be the case, right? And up until this point too, we haven't really talked about what price would be worth it, right? Like, you mentioned, and I actually think the Dorian Finney-Smith thing is instructive about trade deadline kind of machinations and teams' view of their own worth, of their players' worth, right?
Right.
If the Nets are in a situation where they're like probably way overvaluing Dorian Finney-Smith, like 2 first-round picks, I don't think that's ever happening. All right, I just can't. I think he's played well. I just can't envision a world where some team is ditching 2, even like late firsts on Dorian Finney-Smith, right? But if they are holding a firm line on DFS in terms of like shipping him out, I do think they'll probably keep a really low line on a guy like this, right? Like it's where it wouldn't be anything franchise altering. And if it can be had, they would do it. But then maybe the Hawks, who maybe have some buyer's remorse on the 3 firsts that they gave for Dejounte and at the time, that maybe they view it differently. And that's like where they never end up meeting. And that's sometimes just what happens with these things. But I think I have to believe the Nets where Marks has like been in the past pretty good about this, about like star hunting, and maybe it has gotten a little away from him after the KD Kyrie Harden thing. And you give Cam Johnson a long extension, and you're tied to Bridges, who's might have a ceiling. Yeah, I just don't know. Like, I don't know where their thought process is, but I do firmly believe that they wouldn't like empty all the coffers for a guy like Murray. I just don't think that's like how they're built. I hope. But there is a price, right? That like we probably would say yes to, you would think.
Oh yeah, and so it's so two things there. On the Sean Marks piece of it, you hope that he's informed by the experiences with the superstars, right? Hey, it's always worth it to go into those opportunities, to look at them. But looking at Houston now, where once upon a time we said, oh, the one spot I would trade McHale is to Houston for our picks back. Guess what? Houston's refusing every single phone call. They're watching those things climb to lottery value as the Nets move forward here. So you hope that he has kind of pulled the reins back in. And Murray is not on the level of a Kevin Durant, a Kyrie Irving, and James Harden, right? So that's one part of it. The other weird part is the value that they're placing on a Dorian Finney-Smith. So you walk into a conversation with Atlanta. Well, if Atlanta is hearing Sean Marks indicate that they want the equivalent of 2 first-round picks for Dorian Finney-Smith, Atlanta's turning around saying, so then where do you value Dejounte Murray? Because he's clearly a better player. He's a better player than Dorian Finney-Smith, right? So you're doing this both and here. The interesting thing to me is when you look inside of this, right? So from a cost perspective, the salary lining up, hey, fans, you don't want Spencer Dinwiddie on this roster anymore? Great. $20 million. Boom. And it's an expiring contract, so that could be attractive to Atlanta. It's also a backcourt off-ball guard with some ball handling ability, whatever. You want to take a flyer on him in the short term. I know. Hey, sell the things that we don't like for all the good stuff you got, right? Classic sales tactic. But you can do that part of it. Then if you come to picks, you mentioned 3 firsts that they gave up to get them. If you're telling me that the Nets could massage this into, do you have an interest in a Dorian Finney-Smith in the short term? Because if you're Atlanta, are you looking to restructure, not necessarily go into a rebuild? You're keeping Trae Young, Royce O'Neal, right? Other players. They want to move off of Atlanta the Clint Capella contract. Do you have an interest in a Nick Claxton? Do you want to explore that version of your team? So there's worlds where I think Sean Marks and the Nets could say, here's the guys that we don't believe are going to be here long-term for various reasons, but they have value to other teams. Maybe we can package something together that avoids giving up a lot of draft capital, the thing we want to keep, and still serves the agenda of making moves. That still stands to be seen. And the hard part about this is you would think if the Nets want to trade for Murray, they don't want to trade Dorian Finney-Smith. They want to keep him here in the short term. They want to keep Royce O'Neal in the short term. So you're always trying to serve these two agendas. If you move on from even a Nicholas Claxton, okay, how is this team better in the short term then if you open up another hole there at the 5 spot where it's going to be Day'Ron Sharpe when he's back healthy and nobody else? This is the agenda serving that I don't think is going to be easy for the Brooklyn Nets to accomplish and Sean Marks, but we'll talk about. Is this a move that, if the Nets made it, would serve to recognize as the first of multiple they would make at this deadline? We'll dive in on that angle coming up next.
All right, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's past New Year's. We're getting obsessed with how to change ourselves, but something you want to probably focus a little more on is expand on what you already do right. Maybe you're organized one space, you want to just tackle another. Maybe you're taking supplements in the morning. Now you want to actually eat breakfast too. You want to find your strengths so you can ditch the extreme resolutions that make those changes really stick. This is where BetterHelp can get into the fold. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. If you've benefited from therapy in the past, this is you know exactly what you're looking for here. If you haven't tried therapy before, this is how the betterment starts with BetterHelp. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient. It's flexible. It's totally suited to your schedule. All you have to do is you fill out a brief questionnaire. You get matched with a licensed therapist. You switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Once again, BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
And when you're done doing that, you go ahead and head over to FanDuel. Obviously, the NFL regular season is all wrapped up, but there's still plenty of time to get in on the playoff action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is incredibly easy to use, and there's so many different ways to bet. Not only live same-game parlays, you can also find bets in the new Explore tab and make parlays in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find where all those popular bets are getting laid. So many ways to get it done over on FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel is the official betting partner of the NFL. Okay, so the other thing here for me then, when we talk about the potential of making a move like this for Brooklyn, let's assume that players and a couple of picks, right? Like, let's say that's how it gets to. If it's 2 first-round picks and some version of players, point stop, are you making that move if it costs 2 first-round picks, your dealer's choice about where they fall on the spectrum of Phoenix and Dallas and Philly and everything else?
2 first? Nah, I don't think so. I think you have to try. I think you have to try to sit with these as long as possible. And this is recognizing that I do think he would help the team, and it might be a chance to get off, or trade Dinwiddie or something like that, where his value seems to be, kind of petering out here or whatever. I fully recognize that it would help the team right now. I just don't think this is the guy if that's the price. Do you agree with that, or is that like reasonable?
Yeah.
It's closer than I thought. Again, this like losing streak's got me a little bit has me wilding a little bit because
You're right. Guys got me thinking maybe you should trade for anybody and everybody. Maybe Pascal Siakam's $37.5 million for the remainder of the season is not definitely
okay. That one's a clear no. This one's like he's probably just young enough, and he's just kind of what they need. And I also think that's the price is too high.
Yeah, because again, I know it's hard to look at it this way if you're a fan, but okay, 2 first-round picks. Well, 2 years from now, will it have felt like it was worth it when you don't have those 2 picks? Because there's a world where even adding Murray does not change the fact that you're a back-end Eastern Conference play-in tournament team looking to be interesting, but not necessarily exciting in terms of wins or losses. Now, let's go another layer here. What if it was that the Brooklyn Nets don't intend to re-sign Nicholas Claxton? Not about whether or not we think they should or shouldn't, but if I can send Nicholas Claxton and Spencer Dinwiddie and 1 first-round pick for Murray, I do start to have a different conversation. If it's that we know we're not bringing this guy back, so these are effectively depreciating assets in another 3 months.
Yeah, so I understand that one too. And actually signing Murray, I think it was Eric Slater, and I apologize for this because I don't exactly remember, but I'm pretty sure friends of the show, Eric Slater had broken down if they brought in Murray, it would probably really decrease / eliminate the chance to be able to re-sign Claxton at any money with like Simmons' contract still there and stay out of the tax. So it's like you probably are in a situation where if you were to bring Murray in, you are admitting that Claxton might not be part of like the long-term future here, or you're not going to re-sign him. That being said, I think the price on Claxton would be higher than that. And I would not want to just like ship something out to like picks out plus Claxton to bring in Murray too. Right. So I don't think like that calculus works for me either, but making a deal structured around those things and getting more back from Atlanta or something like that, like Capella expiring plus maybe Atlanta ship something. I don't know. Like, I think that starts to get a little more interesting for me. I haven't really fully fleshed that one out. But I would not be of the like essentially like Claxton for Murray straight up deal, right? Like if that, and I think that's like probably it's not the money doesn't work, but you know what I mean. Like they would be able to finagle that. I think I would also not be interested, although that one is a little closer too with how well Sharp has played. So I'm not. It's close.
Yeah, there's some conversation around as I do these things on the fly sometimes. You know me, little trade machine action. You mentioned, Clint Capella has 2 years left right now on his deal, but that's the rumors there with Atlanta as well. Maybe it's a pass through and he ends up somewhere else. But Clint Capella and Murray coming and Spencer Dinwiddie, Claxton, and Royce O'Neal going, it makes Atlanta a better team this year, right? So maybe that's what the Nets in any of these scenarios for Murray or otherwise are trying to drill down on, right? What are the conversations we have here? Well, we do have valuable players. We have Dorian Finney-Smith. We have Royce O'Neal, Spencer Dinwiddie to a lesser extent, but we do have players that make sense for other teams or that can be contributors that can help you win games in the short term, and they try to mitigate the requirement to add in these draft picks so they still keep the powder dry and also make a move that shows an indication, hey, we realize what we are right now is not going to be the answer over the next couple of seasons.
Yeah, and I think the Nets are like, that's the Claxton piece for sure makes this an interesting, because we have no idea what the internal dialogue on Claxton is, right? Like, it's like impossible to know. They're, and Marks and company are usually pretty locked down around this stuff. You tend not to hear too much until it happens with the Nets, like like short of like guys publicly asking out, right? The other stuff that's happened, they're pretty much a vault over there. But so it is kind of impossible to know how they view Claxton and how they view the money and like sort of what's re-signing him would mean for their future prospects of signing someone, like signing like a really big star once Simmons is off the books.
Right.
And so I think actually that, as much as anything, will probably inform some of these other moves of the trade deadline too, right? Because if they don't plan to resign him, they have to trade him, right? Like they just have to. You got to trade him for something now, and I don't even know if a sign and trade is good enough in a situation like that. But we just have like no idea. So would it shock me that Claxton gets attached to some kind of deal like this at the deadline? That really wouldn't shock me at all. Not because there's been any reporting on it, but because it kind of seems there's there's a very logical case to be made for it more than anything else. And so, and I think like that as much as anything else could like shift the fortunes of the Nets here at the trade deadline. It's like how they view that one specific situation. If it's sign, if they know they're going to sign them, then I think that like, well, I just think that like that just changes. It just changes like sort of the way things can kind of shake out.
Well, yeah, as you say, right? If they're keeping Claxton long term, well, then trades are about draft capital because beyond Dorian Finney-Smith or Royce. So okay, that's going to, at least for us here at Locked On Nets, we're going to say that changes my willingness or interest in trading for a guy like Murray. If you're telling me he's not going to be here long term, then he's an asset that you can utilize in these moves. The last thing for me then on this, when you say making a move potentially for a guy like Murray, are you comfortable with the idea of, let's say that it is any iteration of this where we find it palatable, the package that goes out, picks, players, whatever, where it's okay, we're making this decision now so that we can inform what we are going into the offseason, right? A guy like Murray helps us. He adds into the core. We have now Dennis Smith Jr. Will he be here beyond this year? Where does Cam Thomas fit into all of this? All of those pieces. Are you comfortable making them just that one move and saying, okay, now play out the rest of the season, which still could result in missing the playoffs? Or do you feel like this would be Nets make this move and then they are talking about their assets and they are talking about other guys on the market and knowing that they do need to add another piece beyond just Murray if they want to say we're going to be a 9th seed and 8th seed, if we're going to make the playoffs for that symbolic thing that they've been able to accomplish in years past?
Yeah, so I guess what you're saying is like a move like that would be something like, I'm totally making this up, but it'd be something like you bring in Murray with the price low and then you unload your rest of your stuff for like Lauri Markkanen, right? Something like that. Like, right. It's like, oh, it's like younger, maybe the Jazz have been kind of good. So I don't really know if they're
they're probably refusing, but here's the 27 to 29 core.
Yeah, I'm just using him as an example of a guy where if like Utah is trying to reset the deck even more and they're like, is really going to strip it all down and he doesn't totally fit their timeline. Something like a move like that. Like that would be interesting. It's not a championship caliber thing, but it's like that's a pretty good team, exciting team to watch for 4 years or something like that, right? And it's a low level playoff team, and I don't know, is that like the right move? Probably not, but I think like that is like that's like sort of like the tenor of move I think that you're talking about, right? Yeah. It's where it's like that would take real pieces, like that would take the Phoenix picks or something like that to actually get. And if you could do one thing for cheap and then spend a lot on the other thing, and you're all kind of on the same timeline, it's like, hey, we'll be decent for 3 years. We're not going to win a championship. And then Simmons will be off the book and whatever. Like, again, making this completely up on the fly. Right. But a move like that, I think I'd be okay with that. At some point, you have to like be excited. When you don't have your own picks, you do have to try to like be exciting too. Like you can't have neither. you can't be tanking for no reason.
Winning, and we're not fun to watch.
Yeah, like look, we only got X amount of days on this earth, right? Like, like this isn't. We're not on the unlimited timeline here. I got a little patience in me, but I don't have unlimited patience because none of us do. So I think like that would be, that kind of idea would be interesting to me for sure.
And because that agenda is about, this is my final thought, is that agenda gets you beyond the picks that you traded away to Houston, right? It gets you back to the point where now I'm back in control of my own assets. We dictate our own terms here. And in the meantime, we made the calculated choice. We want to be a team that was over 500 for the next few seasons. We want to be a team that goes to the playoffs, and that is exciting to watch and can be kind of, oh, what a fun series we'll have in the first round. Right now, you don't look at that prospect, even if this team did turn it around, and think they would be any type of interesting in a 1-8 series in the Eastern Conference. So I think that does matter a little bit here for Brooklyn. And so if you made the move for me for Murray, then it has to be step one of a multi-step plan in the short term.
And we keep saying this is our final point. And this really will be my final point. Moves
I'll
like
have one
that,
more.
where it's like
Yeah.
2 moves around not superstar level guys, but well above average guys, would also probably give you the latitude to move on from Jacques Vaughn too. Because right now they really can't move. In my mind, they can't move on from Vaughn or won't move on from Vaughn because whoever the next person is set up for like to go nowhere also. Like they can maybe get a little moderately better, but they're not going to get light years better with this current roster. But if you had a reset with players, I think it would give you you would then open the door to be able to be like giving the next person the chance to succeed, because that's really what you need to be able to do. If you were thinking about moving on from Vaughn, again, you can't do it right now. There's no point. There's literally no point. Like the next coach will look only probably slightly better, right? And so just because they don't have enough firepower on the team. Okay, a lot of thoughts here. This one went a little bit further than we thought it was going to, but it's cool. This is why the trade deadline and leading up to it, less than a month away, 3 weeks away. It's always such an exciting time. Make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Nets over on YouTube as we push towards 7,000 subscribers. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts as well. Leave a 5-star review. That kind of stuff still helps in this day and age. Free for you. Really pays off for us. Subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Forgiveness is the needle that knows how to mend. That's Jewel.
Oh, one of the all-time great Alaskan poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.